In this video you will find out that there is so much more you can do with just a stencil and some ink. Also watch me color the new cute Odey stamp designed by CarlaCreates for VaessenCreative. And see how you can stamp the text on the inside exactly in the same spot as on the outside of the card. Hello, it's Cisvolk. Time to enjoy card making with me. Today I will use the bubble stencil by CarlaCreates. If you combine it with VaessenCreative ink, you can achieve very fun results. You will be surprised how you can turn a plain colored piece of paper into a fancy dotted one. I will also use the new Odey stamp collection. Aren't the cat and the dog the cutest? The paper I use is from VaessenCreative. This color range comes from their Christmas collection. I chose the green color called Holly, but you can use any color cardstock you like. First, cut a piece of paper to the size of your card panel. I usually make mine 10.5 by 14.8 cm, but you can use any size that fits your project. Because I will be using embossing powder and I'm not sure if my stencil is clean or if the paper has fingerprints on it, I use an embossing pouch filled with a kind of talcum powder to remove any grease from the surface. The paper becomes a little lighter in color, but this way I can be sure the embossing will work well. Later we can simply wipe off the powder. I tape the paper to the back of the stencil so it stays in place. Now I take a small sponge that I use only for VaessenCreative ink. You can get this ink in both large and small pads. It is exactly the same ink. My small ink pad still looks clean as it should, but my large one has become quite dirty over time. However, the ink inside works just as well. There are refills available too, so you can easily refresh your ink pad. I apply some ink to the sponge, so my sponge basically becomes an ink pad. You can also press the ink pad directly onto the stencil, but that uses a lot more ink and the dauber gives you a better control. You can also use a blending brush, as long as it is reserved only for VaessenCreative ink. You will immediately see that when you apply the ink, the areas where it touches the stencil turn slightly darker. If you apply VaessenCreative re-inker directly to the blending sponge, you can also add ink. But make sure not to use too much and spread it evenly into the sponge before you start ink blending. This ink creates a beautiful watermark effect on the paper. Now let us dry this layer. I use the heat tool on the highest setting. Of course, you can also let it dry overnight, but using a heat tool is much faster. Now I will apply the second layer. I just turn the stencil a quarter turn and place it back onto the tape that is still there. For the second layer, I apply Distress Oxide ink to the paper. Distress Oxide is opaque, so you can easily use it on colored cardstock. I use the green color Rustic Wilderness for blending. I use the blending foam to apply the color, but blending brushes also work great. Actually, even better. I just do not have enough brushes to keep separate ones for both regular ink and oxide ink, because you don't want to mix those inks on a blending brush. Once again, I let the ink dry completely. For the third layer, I place the stencil back in a different position. I apply VaessenCreative ink again, after dusting the surface with the embossing pouch once more. You can clearly see 3 different shades of ink now. The Distress Oxide color, the dried VaessenCreative ink and the VaessenCreative ink that is still wet. I sprinkle on green glitter embossing powder by Nellie's Choice. The powder sticks to the ink and I melt it using the heat tool. The order in which I apply the different mediums might not be the easiest one. I also demonstrated this technique recently at CAR02, the creative fair in Utrecht, where I had the pleasure of showing the beautiful VaessenCreative supplies and the CarlaCreates collections. You can also start with the Distress Oxide layer, let it dry well, then do the heat embossing and finally add a layer of just VaessenMark ink. VaessenMark takes quite a long time to dry, so remember that embossing powder will stick to any areas that are still wet. As long as it has not been heated yet, you can simply brush off any excess embossing powder. This is a fun way to make your own colored and structured paper. If you don't want to put in that much work, you can of course use a piece of pattern paper, plain paper, or simply ink blend this paper with one ink color. Now I'm starting with stamping and coloring Odey, the cute little dog designed by Carla. I stamp with Onyx Black VersaFine ink on smooth white watercolor paper from Florence, 200 grams. I heat emboss it with clear embossing powder and then color the image using Distress ink. There are separate paws for the cat and for the dog. I stamp the plain one, which is for the dog. I stamp it twice so I can use two paws. After heat embossing and coloring, I will explain how I assemble the card and how I add the sentiment. Enjoy watching! The stencil I use is not wide enough for the full width of the card I am making. To make it look more complete, I am touching up the edges a little. I align the dots at the ends of the strip with the stencil pattern and secure it in place again with some tape. I do this on both sides of the strip, both for the areas that I heat embossed and for the dots that I made using only VaessenCreative ink. To get the text in the right position, I use a stamping platform. I hold the green paper in place and position all the text I want to use in the correct spot. Because I want to stamp the small text in black and have the large text embossed in another color, I remove the large sentiment stamp, the colored image and the green paper. Then I close the lid to pick up only the stamps I want to ink in black. The paper in my stamping platform is a piece of smooth white cardstock folded in half. I gently wipe over it with the embossing pouch to remove any fingerprints or grease. Next I ink up the small words with black ink. When pressing down the stamp, I do not press hard, just make sure it touches the paper. If you press too hard, the impression will have thicker lines and it will not look as crisp or even as you want. Of course, I heat embossed its part. Then I clean the stamps with a microfiber cloth and just a bit of water. I place the card back in the same corner of the stamping platform and position the larger word between the smaller words. Again, I pick up the stamp with the lid of the platform. Then I add a little talcum powder just to make sure there are no sticky spots from the previous stamping that could grab the embossing powder. Next I apply VaessenCreative ink to the stamp. I do not want to stamp the large word in black. Instead, I am going to heat emboss it with green glitter embossing powder. VaessenCreative is a sticky ink, perfect for holding colored embossing powder. You can hardly see what you stamped at first, but it becomes visible when you add the powder. The green glitter embossing powder I use is still the same one as on the green background, Nellie's Choice Super Sparkle Green. I let the powder fall off the paper from different sides to make sure the ink is fully covered. When I heat emboss this, I use the first setting on my heat tool, because I am now working on slightly thinner cardstock, which curls faster than the 200 grams watercolor paper. I heat it from both the back and the front of the paper, also to help prevent warping. The bottom edge of the paper still looks a little empty to me. To bring back the darker black lines from the sentiment and the stamped dog, I draw a line just above the edge of the green paper. The easiest way to do that is to measure where the line should go first, and then draw it using a ruler. Now I place the card back into the stamping platform, but this time I open it so the inside is visible. I placed Odey in position and then I close the card. Next I position the new sentiments about the same way as I did for the front of the card. As you can see, I place these sentiments right on top of the ones I already stamped. This way, the text on the inside of the card will be aligned in exactly the same position as the text on the front. I close the lid and only pick up the smaller sentiment because I have removed the larger text stamp. Only the small text needs to be black, so I will stamp that text separately in black and heat emboss it with clear embossing powder. Now comes the final step, stamping and heat embossing the large sentiment inside the card. Place the card back in the stamping platform and position the large text below the smaller one. You can align the text right in the middle, under the smaller sentiment. This large text I stamp with VaessenCreative ink and sprinkle with green embossing powder. The same as on the front of the card. Remember to blow over the powder to blow away any excess grains that do not stick to the ink. I also heat emboss from the back of the paper, because this cardstock is a bit thinner and it helps to keep it flat. Now the green strip with the dots can be attached to the card. I use double-sided tape to prevent warping. I stick the cute dog Odey with foam blocks at the top and a small dot of glue at the bottom. Do you see that I placed the dog's head slightly tilted? That makes it just a little cuter. Now the green strip can be glued on top, covering the end of his neck. I attach his paws raised with foam tape and let them slightly hang over the green strip. The green strip is just a bit narrower than the card. With a paper trimmer or guillotine cutter you can easily trim off the edge. Odey can also be placed on the inside of the card, and any part of his body that sticks out can be trimmed off. You can add some movement by drawing a few curved lines next to his paws or ears. I also stamped some round circles near Odey with a few lines, so it looks like they are bouncing. Did you enjoy this video? Let me know in the comments and subscribe to my YouTube channel Cisvolk. All my inspiration examples can be found on my Facebook, Pinterest and Instagram pages. And you can also watch more videos I made over the years, uploaded here on YouTube. Product information and links to all materials I used are listed below the video. Enjoy card making! And I will see you next time. Bye bye!